Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 inventions we have war to thank for. As Tolstoy once said, war, what is it good for? Well, if the past is any indicator, it seems to bring about something in human nature. War inadvertently brings with it this need to create something better and the need to research new technologies to solve problems, which in turn brings about some very unexpected results and innovations. While some may be a little unusual and surprising, others can be life-changing. In the video today, we're looking at some inventions that we have war to thank for.
Number 10. Margarine. You can thank Napoleon III. Not that one, this was his nephew for this invention. Margarine was invented by Hippolyte Mege when Napoleon wanted a better substitute to feed his soldiers and the poor in his empire due to the fact that butter was expensive. He offered a prize to the person who could come up with a butter substitute for his army. Mege presented Napoleon with his butter substitute, which he called margarine. Napoleon was looking for a substitute that was cheap, spread, and tasted like butter and lasted longer than the real thing, and Mege margarine did just that. Yet at the time, this creation did not become popular. It wasn't until Mege sold the patent to a Dutch butter-making company that margarine really took off. Sadly, Mege did not profit from his discovery and died a poor man in 1880, living long enough to see his margarine become internationally famous. Number 9. Canned food. The tins of peas, carrots, and other random vegetables that you eat with your dinner all owe their existence, at least in part, to war. Nicolas Appert can be thanked for providing the foundation for canned food. It was in the late 18th century when Napoleon Bonaparte offered a prize to any person that could come up with a way to successfully preserve food. Apparently, when he wasn't invading Russia during the winter, Napoleon, and as noted in the previous entry, his family, liked staging random food contests that would have fit nicely on Shark Tank. Anyway, older traditional methods for food storage didn't preserve items long enough, and Napoleon needed a way to send food to France's armies all around the world. Napoleon offered 12,000 francs to anyone who could do this. Appert won the prize with his process and laid down the foundation for modern tinned foodstuff. His process involved heating food in sealed glass jars and bottles placed in boiling water. This process was then built upon by numerous inventors, eventually giving way to the tin can and your can of peas. Number 8. Silly putty. Silly putty is yet another accidental byproduct of war, and specifically the research that goes into wartime effort. It was during World War II that silly putty came into existence. The war had left many resources in short supply, one of these being rubber. The US military needed an inexpensive substitute because rubber was vital in the war effort as it was used in tires, boots, rafts, and gas masks. In 1943, scientist James Wright was researching synthetic rubber when he combined boric acid with silicone oil. The result was literally a glob of goo. After experiments on the substance, Wright concluded that it was useless as a substitute for rubber, but found that the material could bounce, stretch farther than normal rubber, and had a very high melting point. It wasn't until after the war that silly putty came into its own. It proved to be a huge hit with children around the world, and even adults found use for the substance, using it to fix things around the house. Silly putty was even brought to space by the astronauts on Apollo 8. Number 7. The Slinky. In 1943, engineer Richard James was working on a system that would be used to stabilize and support sensitive equipment on board ships in rough seas during war. The Slinky started out as a spring, or tension spring to be more exact. At some point during the project, James knocked over a box of springs he was using. This box contained a tension spring, and as he started to pick up the springs, he noticed that the tension spring seemed to keep moving, almost as if it was walking, and so the Slinky was born. James and his wife saw the potential of the Slinky as a children's toy and began to market it that way. At first, sales were slow, but at Christmas of 1945, Gimbel's department store allowed James to demonstrate his new toy. Within 90 minutes, the first 400 Slinkies were sold. Number 6. The Jerry Can. The jerry can was a German invention developed in the 1930s for military use at the start of World War II. The Germans saw the importance of being able to carry fuel and water, and by the time World War II came about, they had stockpiled thousands of these in anticipation of the conflict. These jerry cans turned out to be far superior to their Allied counterparts. They were robust, durable, and easy to transport. The original design featured an X on each side, allowing room for expansion and adding strength to the structure. On the top of the can, there were 3 handles, making it easier to pass from one person to another, and also allowing 2 cans to be carried side by side in one hand. When the US military was informed of the invention, they ignored it, but it eventually found its way to Camp Holabird, where it was reverse-engineered and redesigned. Number 5. The Microwave. The microwave is another member of the accidental invention group. The potential of microwaves was realized by Percy Spencer, who was researching radar technology. Spencer was working on magnetrons one day when he noticed that a chocolate bar that he had in his pocket had begun to melt. Spencer, who worked for the company Raytheon at the time, realized the potential of this discovery. After more experimentation, Spencer realized that this microwave technology could be concentrated to cook food quicker than a normal oven. Raytheon produced the first microwave in 1947. It was large, expensive, and wasn't very popular. It wasn't until some time later, when microwaves became smaller and more affordable, that they rose in popularity. If it wasn't for the war and the research into radar and microwave technology, Spencer may not have stumbled upon this invention that changed kitchens forever. And speaking of radar technology, number 4, radar systems. The idea of radar was around before World War II, but it was in that war that the first practical radar system was developed by Robert Watson Watt. Watson Watt developed the technology when a series of radar-related discoveries allowed him to do so. Watson Watt built on these discoveries and realized that he could use radio transmitters to create an echo off an airplane by bouncing radio waves off of it. The plane could be over 100 miles away, yet the echo would return. Watson Watt presented this information to the Royal Air Force and believed that this technique could give the RAF an early warning system to alert them of the threat of incoming planes. The radar allowed the Air Force to see when the enemy was coming, and not only that, but how many planes and how far away they were. This meant that the enemy lost the element of surprise. This invention helped turn the Battle of Britain in favor of the RAF. Number 3, sanitary pads. Yes, you have got war to thank for disposable sanitary pads too. Although throughout history menstrual pads have been used and made from various materials like cotton and fur, it wasn't until World War I that nurses in France realized the bandages they were using on the injured soldiers could also be used for their own personal use. These particular bandages were made from a combination of wood pulp, fibers, and other materials, a combination that made them much more absorbent than normal cotton bandages. They became popular with nurses because they were readily available, much more absorbent, and very cheap, which meant that the bandages could simply be thrown away when they were no longer useful. The Kimberly-Clark Corporation that supplied these bandages to the nurses during the war was left with a surplus of bandages after World War I and used the nurses' idea to create the first disposable pads. Number 2, superglue. Superglues were discovered in 1942. Contrary to popular belief, superglues were not specifically invented to glue wounds together during battle, but were in fact an accidental invention created by Harry Coover. Coover was actually attempting to create a clear plastic gun sight to be used on rifles by the Allies. It was during his research into these sights that he stumbled onto the formula that eventually became superglue. Yet, due to the fact Coover was working on making sights for guns, he considered the sticky substance useless and threw it aside. It wasn't until some years later, while working on another project, that he and a colleague discovered the formula for the second time. At this stage, Coover was working for a company called Eastman Kodak. Coover and his colleague Fred Joyner realized the commercial potential of this formula due to the fact that it stuck to just about everything. Although not specifically invented for sealing wounds, Coover's invention would go on to do just that. During the Vietnam War, superglue was reportedly used to seal the wounds of injured soldiers to prevent them from bleeding out until they could get to a hospital and be stitched up. Number 1. Duct tape. Duct tape came about during the Second World War after the US military needed a way to safely seal ammunition cases while also keeping the moisture out. It was created by a division of the Johnson & Johnson company, which used medical tape as a base and applied a couple of new technologies to create a tape that was durable and waterproof. They used a rubber adhesive, and the polyethylene coating allowed them to stick a cloth backing onto the tape. The result was the water-repelling tape that we know and use for basically everything imaginable today. Soldiers came to refer to it as duct tape with a K during the war, partly due to its ability to have water simply roll right off it. The versatility and durability of duct tape allowed it to continue to sell after the war. The makers of the tape changed its name from Duck to Duct and changed the color of the tape from army green to the gray we see it as now, both due to the fact that after the war, duct tape was used to repair air conditioning ducts in homes, and these ducts were gray in color.
So I really hope you liked that video. If you did, just click that like button below the screen, and if you did like it, do subscribe to our channel because we put out other brand new videos just like this 7 days a week. Also, be sure to check out our back catalogue. We have over 600 videos now just like this for your enjoyment. And over there on the right, a couple of examples of those, so be sure to check those out, and thank you for watching.